Stockton's best friend, Mulder, wagged his tail back and forth. The entire rear half of his body wagged with it. The two of them looked out through their screen door. I stepped onto their broad wooden porch and slowly crossed it with my Cuban-heeled, point-toed, low-cut boots on that I'd picked up a long time ago in New York City. Stockton looked down at his little companion and smoothly paraphrased from an old song we used to play a lot in our younger years. Mulder, that sound you're hearing right now, that's the sound of the low spark of high-heeled boys. Seeing the two of them sure did put a smile on my face. It felt good to be back around. Hey, Mulder, how are you, little big guy? How are you? What a good boy. He did a 360 and made his usual hello bark. Then he stood up and pressed against the screen. And Stockton. What's the lowdown on the old what's up? Looks like you've been doing your push-ups, man. Stockton looked at me as if to say, you gotta be kidding me. Get down, Mulder. Mulder just got more excited. Come on now. Get down, buddy. Stockton picked him up. Mulder tried to kick himself free, but only managed to lick his master's nose. Stockton put him back down and held open the door for me. Enter this old house of many haunts, my long-lost friend. Your hair's getting longer than ever. Where on earth have you been these last few months? Everything all right? You okay? I dropped my eyelids a little and feigned profoundness. Of course I'm okay. I'm always okay. I've never not been okay. Guys like you and I, Stockton, we're never not okay. I took hold of the door and went on in. Mulder jumped up at me as high as he could a couple times, which was not quite up to my waist, so I bent down and I patted him on his head. I know. It's good to see you again too, Mulder. And he bounded back the hall. Next thing I heard him crunching on his food out in the kitchen. He's a great dog, a big personality, wouldn't hurt a flea. Well, maybe he would hurt a flea. The door closed on its own behind me. That ain't no lie, it is the truth. The truth, I tell you, we're always okay. Stockton's voice, plus those frequent references to lies versus truth, always ring with a hint of the mysterious and the mystical. Fittingly so, the firm believer that he is in things unseen, inside us and outside us alike. Come with me into the kitchen here. I was just putting together something to eat. You can join me. Still staying away from meat, I presume? Well, hell, not if it's the only thing around. What, you mean to tell me you don't have a bag of kale, a jar of whale food, and a handful of psilocybin mushrooms for their minerals, fresh on hand? I'm afraid I'm fresh out of all three. I have some bison and steamed asparagus, homegrown steamed asparagus going here, though. My mouth's watering already. Medium rare on the bison, sir, and steamed on the homegrown. 2 orders of bison and steamed asparagus, king size, he called out. All right, then. Pull yourself up a sit down and let's have a long-awaited powwow. Do tell of your latest adventures. I'm sure they're as eventful as always. Me, myself, I've been just here taking care of the usual affairs, doing my crime show, writing a new book on missing persons, and making my films about the paranormal. So really, what have you been doing? Well, I took a little time away. I went on down to Venezuela and got myself some new bones, that's all. At the word bones, Mulder got excited again, like I might have a treat for him or something. Stockton tossed him down a little chunk of bison, which Mulder caught midair and promptly wolfed down. Now, wait a second. New bones. Did you say you got yourself some new bones? Since when have you been interested in archaeology or anthropology? You mean human bones? I nodded. That's right, Stockton. Human bones. He pushed around the bison in the skillet, and he checked the asparagus. You gonna want some steak sauce and sea salt? I have A1 steak sauce and pink Himalayan sea salt. It's the only type of salt I ever use. Don't be silly, I said. I wouldn't eat without them. Good. He sat down across the table. Mulder appeared on his lap. Now, Venezuela. New bones, huh? The floor is yours. Okay. Well, Stockton, the new bones thing was accidental. I'll get to it here in a minute. You have to hear the whole thing. I'd been getting tired of the mundane and the same old day-to-day. You remember, I was talking about something new for a good while. Now, right here, at first, I thought I'd play a little joke on him and insert some tall tale about me heading an archaeological dig outside of Cairo, during which I stumble upon the naughty truth about harems and the eunuchs who used to guard them. But it occurred to me that, of course, Cairo isn't even anywhere near Venezuela, and Stockton deserved the truth anyway, no joking around. And he said that, yes, he recalls that. And then he leaned into him, he said, but I didn't know you took off to South America, for God's sakes. Well, I said, now, there you go again. I don't know why you do me that way, Stockton. Every time I come around here, you go and talk like I've crossed some invisible line or something, and it hurts my feelings. Stockton, I'm telling you, it really hurts my feelings, and now I'm upset. He smiled pretty big. It's great seeing you. I apologized for not having apprised him of my departure to the lost world. I did it on the spur of the moment, I told him. I woke up one day and I thought about that story, that book, The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I got out of bed, packed up some stuff in my backpack, drove over to the airport, bought myself a ticket, and flew down to Venezuela to visit the mysterious area myself. As per the usual, I had no real plan. I just wanted to get away. And if it involved an element of the unknown, and an element of chance, and one of danger, all the better. Of course, he concurred. No good at all without those. Mulder jumped down and left the kitchen. Right. You and I think alike about such things. Always have. Probably always will. Then Stockton, trying to make a smart-ass joke with some of his inherited gypsy witch lingo, commented, but aren't there really 4 elements in nature? Not to mention the elusive ether. You mentioned only 3 just now. I was about to say something about that's not very Christian of him, but I got a better idea. I just looked at him like his humor bored me to death, and otherwise I acted like I didn't even hear it. I went on, well, do you remember this one night when we drove out to some lake in the woods, which I kept saying smelled more like a swamp than a lake? But we galvanized up to steel to go swimming in it anyway. And then we got the holy crap scared out of us because something drifted against both our legs under the water, and it felt to both of us like somebody else's leg. I sure do. I got nervous over the structural integrity of the old spit viper and brass clankers, and I got out of there as fast as I could. Yeah, you did. You scrambled out like piranhas had a hold of them. You could have won an Olympic medal. I wasn't far behind you either, Stockton. And now, Do you remember the very next day we read in the Gatlinburg Daily Post that earlier on the day before, the day of the night we went swimming there in the dark, police had learned about a dismemberment, the remains of which had got dumped into that very same lake, and they hadn't found the body parts yet? Who could forget about that, right? That ain't no lie, it is the truth. Ever since then, I tell you what, the only place I've gone swimming is in the pool at the Y right in town here. And by the way, I don't know if I ever told you this, but that's part of why I got interested in doing my crime radio show. No kidding. No, I don't think you ever told me that. Do you think maybe it also explains some of your interest in writing the missing person accounts? Huh. Maybe you're right about that, he said. Good point. I never really thought about it before. But maybe you're right. He turned down the corners of his mouth, looked into the distance, and gave that faint nod which indicates sticking something into the back of your mind for later consideration. I went on. Okay, so I thought about that night and of the following day's report in the paper when I was on the plane. Dinner got served and cleaned back up, and then I fell to sleep as night rolled in somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico. Now at that point, Stockton jumped up and checked the bison and the asparagus, both of which by now were overdone by only a small measure. He served them up, and we bowed our heads, thanking Brother Bison for his sacrifice on our behalves. And then we added some A1 sauce and some pink Himalayan sea salt to the meat and some roll butter to our asparagus, and we dined quietly while Mulder crunched away with his snout down inside his own bowl of sustenance a few feet off. When finished, Stockton poured us 2 glasses of port wine, the preferred drink of philosophers, and we made our ways downstairs to the room where Stockton has his production gear set up. His new Ibanez bass guitar, which he named after me because of the way I make horror movie sound effects with my own, it stood over in one corner under some paintings he'd done, and his synthesizers and microphones and recording equipment and cameras and his desk and his computers and piles of books and CDs and his amps and everything and cables on the floor, all of it pretty much filled up the whole room with just enough space left over for his couple of catnap recliners into which we now sunk to let our meals digest. Then I picked up with my chronicle. So now, where was I? Somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico asleep. Right. Okay. Well, I had a curious dream. A rather lucid one, I might add. In the dream, all of my teeth fell out, which in itself is, it's unsettling, but of course not unheard of. People have that dream sometimes. But then all my bones fractured and fell out too. And I could hear them breaking. Every break, Stockton, and there must have been hundreds of them by the time it was all said and done. Every one sounded like a bass drum. And then I woke up down on the floor, wedged into the small foot space. I was only in coach for the whole flight, not first class or anything. And when I tried to move at first, my whole body just felt like rubber. Fortunately, nobody noticed. The cabin lights had got dimmed, and the woman beside me had soundly passed out. Her mouth gaped open in a grotesque way, I tell you, with her lower lip sunk back into her mouth hole like she died or whatever, and I wondered what her husband thought of that look in bed. If she even has a husband, what with that ghastly opening in the front of her head. Stockton laughed and winced at the same time, like he'd got whacked on his mental funny bone. But the thing is, Stockton, for a moment or so I couldn't get my body to cooperate whatsoever. felt too rubbery. And somehow I could barely even feel the presence of my body, like something about it was missing. I couldn't figure it out. Right now I'm even guessing here at the words to describe it. I'd never felt like anything like that before. But before anybody walked by and saw me like that, thank the gods, the phenomena dissipated. And I felt my old arthritis come back into my hands, which right then I welcomed, and I could move better. You remember I used to sit right here and try to crack my knuckles, and then I'd gripe about it, and you'd say I already passed being a Twilight Zone has-been a long time ago, and now I'm just a 13 past midnight bingon. Remember? Stockton pretty much cracked up. Just drink some of your port. So I did, and he drank some of his. Then I continued. Anyway, so I got up and I got back in my seat and I checked my teeth and I felt around some other areas and everything seemed to be in its usual order. And this time I buckled up like a good boy. I mean, enough of this business of waking up down on the floor of a fuselage feeling like a rubber plant. You follow me, Stockton? Enough with that noise. I'm with you on that one. Wow. It is kind of funny to picture, though, you down on the floor like that. But that woman in the seat beside you? Now, there's an image I didn't need. Well, I teased him, maybe if we both concentrate enough on that image right now, we can manifest her looking like that, having a cat nap right there beside you, Stockton. You want to give it a shot? Then you can feature her on a live stream paranormal broadcast in real time. And that way your book sales will soar with the condors and you'll get rich. And then you can fund me to head off an archaeological expedition somewhere outside of Cairo. Stockton settled back in his chair a little further, I guess expecting a whole tale of Egypt to unfold now. I was on a roll anyway, so I kept going with it. Yeah, I've been wanting to do some digging around over there anyway. I hear there's some as of yet uncovered dirt about harems and eunuchs. Hey, Stockton, did you know that a castrated man can still get it up? Plus, I hear that there's this one place out there in the desert where when people dig up certain stuff, some haggardly-looking woman named Flo Hackney comes flying by in an old faded blue Ford Galaxy 500, fishtailing sideways and throwing up sand in people's eyes, with the windows all rolled down. And that Mac Davis song about baby, baby, don't get hooked on me, blasted on the radio every time. And then she disappears over a sand dune toward her alleged shanty where her two 40-year-old twin boys, Flem and Mucus Hackney, play Jack the Beanstalk all day together. Stockton played along. Okay, let's do it. I used to have one of those galaxies just because of its name. And we'll take Mulder over there with us, and he can help us dig up bones. He has a nose for bones like you wouldn't believe. I said, yeah, maybe he does. But Stockton, I want to believe. The truth is out there. He said, I knew it. I just knew you were going to say that. I was just now trying to think of something like that to say myself. I always did like that X-Files TV series. And you and I are both well aware of the fact that a lot of stuff like that on TV sneaks in hints of real things camouflaged by the atmosphere of fiction. But you know, you just now stole Agent Mulder's lines. I thought you were more original than that. I said, yeah, well, I claim poetic license. I just want to know whether with that little boob tube tangent that you just went on right now, you successfully managed to excise from your mind the mental image of that dead-looking woman beside me on the plane. Thanks a lot, bonefish. His voice is smooth as usual. But you're right, though. On with the story. Back to Venezuela. This whole thing fascinates me. I mean it. I'm all ears here. You said you got back in your seat, and you buckled up like a good boy. Okay, so then what? The rest of the trip down went well. We landed in Caracas. Stockton, you know how a lot of people, when they go on vacation, they crowd in so many things to do that by the time they get back home, they feel like they need a vacation from the vacation? Well, I learned my lesson about that a long time ago, so I just stayed around Caracas, strolling here and there, getting familiar with the local customs, and not doing much else for about a month, just laying low, you know. And it's a good thing I did too, Stockton, because overinflation has hit Venezuela really hard over the last years, and personal safety has got pretty rough. And along with that, the U.S. greenback stretches further than perhaps anywhere else on the continent there. But the thing is, I needed to be cautious about where I went, so all added up, for various reasons, I desired to take my time with things and maintain a temporary home base in relatively safe accommodations, and I realized I had the funds to do that. I was able to try out my rusty Spanish skills and to bone up on a regional language called Pemon, which I thought might come in handy because I wanted to stop by a Salto Angel, the famous waterfall, the highest one in the world. Did you know that it's about 16 times higher than Niagara Falls? Well, eventually I felt more comfortable with the culture and I got itchy to move on. A combination of road, plane, and foot travel, and some village stopovers, at last put me atop the majestic and eerie Ayuntepui, from which the shimmering cascade pours to its base 3,000 feet below. I wish you could see it, Stockton, I really do. It's one of those things a person should try to see during his life, like Everest on a clear day, or the lights of Cape Town during the night as he sails back from Antarctica with the aurora overhead. I made my slow way down to the base then, and I lost track of the days. By dugout canoe and foot, I had no idea where. Fortunately, I had earlier also boned up on foraging the Guiana Highlands flora for food. And of course, finding water was no problem. Although the general dampness exacerbated the arthritis in my hands, for the first time ever, I felt my earthly cares slip away, literally lost in the lost world. Pretty damn cool, isn't it, Stockton? Well, all I can say is that I'm lost for words, enthralled, spellbound. Pray tell, where does the new bones part come in? Close, we're getting close. I ended up between two towering cliffs one afternoon. By then, prehistoric images, even visions, increasingly entered my mind. Everything larger than life, evolution, the powerful forces of nature, formation and transformation, the spiritual urge for all things to become more than what they are. I saw it all in motion. But moreover, Stockton, I felt it. The lost world itself had absorbed me into its own story of being and time. And now deep in a canyon, beside a narrow and peaceful water flow, I laid down on a flat stretch of solid rock at the mouth of a cave, shielded from the blaze of the equatorial sun, and I rested my eyes. Maybe I fell asleep like that. Maybe I didn't. I'm not sure. But then I heard voices speaking a language I'd never heard before. I opened my eyes and it was night. A small fire crackled next to me, and in its light I made out the wrinkled faces of 3 elderly men squatting on the other side of it, naked. I sat up. The 3 men noticed they just kept talking amongst themselves, and now and then they gestured, pointing this way and that way, and once or twice at me, and up to the sky, and over to the stream of water. Then one of them slapped his palms against the rock surface beneath us. The other 2 followed suit, and after that, they didn't talk anymore. The fire kept crackling, though, and the man who'd slapped the rock first, he lifted up a wooden bowl that the fire had hidden from my view up until then, and he passed it around to me. Now here I paused and I drank some more of my port. I had to ready myself for telling Stockton the main part of the whole thing. Not that it's long or anything like that, it's just that it was going to be a little hard to get it right. It was the first time I ever told it to anybody, and maybe it was going to be the last. So, beyond that, I wanted to make sure that Stockton's anticipation hit its peak. He too sipped at his glass of port, and he looked back at me expectantly, but I changed the subject. Port is the preferred drink of philosophers, you know. Oh, for God's sakes, he said, just tell me the rest of what happened. What was in the bowl? He looked like he was about to launch out of his recliner. Perfect. Oh, well, Stockton, I know you know about the age-old religious and ritual uses of certain natural substances to instrument depth of mystical experiences, such as during tribal rites of initiation from boyhood into manhood. Well, maybe what was in the bowl was something like that. Probably, though, I'll never know for sure. But I can tell you this. I took the bowl, and at first I just held it up to my nose. The smell of it reminded me of a woman's menstrual fluid. And yet not really offensive. At least not to me at the time. But it was just as potent smelling. Metallic, fishy or seaweedy, and earthy all mixed together. Interesting. So what did it look like? Well, it was a little hard to get a good look at it in the dim and shifting light. But from what I could make out, it looked like a grayish-green glob of paste. And at moments also with a hint of reflective crimson, depending on how I tilted the bowl. And there was only a little of it in there, a little smaller than a golf ball. I remember thinking to myself, if this is food, then it's a pretty small portion. Probably a native power food, like microalgae is, you know? And then, yes, the man who passed it to me gestured for me to eat it, while he nodded his head suggestively. Now, sure, I felt hungry, Stockton. I wasn't quite ready, though, to eat whatever anybody just up and handed me, and especially when it smells and looks like this stuff did. But the man made the gesture again, pointing to the bowl, shaping his fingers like a scoop, and then raising his hand to his mouth. And then the other 2 did the same thing, and they all nodded at me together. So I scooped the whole mass up with my fingers, and I put it in my mouth. The first thing I noticed was a tingling sensation on my tongue, which quickly spread through my entire mouth. Then the most god-awful taste dawned on my awareness, and I just about threw up. But I held it back, and gagged, and twisted my face, and shuddered. The 3 men laughed, and they nodded some more, and gestured encouragingly for me to chew it up and swallow it. Sounds about bit for the course, Stockton asserted. Yeah, it does, I guess. But I sure could have used an immediate second course involving some of this good Portuguese wine. Well, at that, we drank the last of what was in our glasses, and Stockton said, "But I'll bet it wasn't really just food." Well, who's to say? Like I already said, I'll probably never know. All I'm sure of is what happened. It didn't take long for me to choke down the stuff just to get it out of my mouth. By the time it hit my stomach, the bad taste went away entirely. But in a strange way, it's like this. My entire body now felt like both the initial smell and the taste of the stuff, both. The taste itself that was in my mouth at first, it was still there, but suddenly it just seemed normal. Although the state of affairs was anything but normal, if this makes any sense. Sounds to me like some really powerful stuff. I let out a puff of air. Yeah. So I set down the bowl and I sat there not sure what to do. I thought there might be some more instruction or what have you on the way, but the men then pretty much ignored me. And they went back to talking amongst themselves, like they'd done what they'd had in mind to do, and now their talk just had a more casual sound to it, and they didn't use as much body language as before. In a few minutes, a metallic taste came up from my saliva glands, and a mildly electrical sensation ran through me, Stockton. It kept running through me in stronger and stronger waves. Then the taste was gone. I looked at the men again, but it was sort of like I could see right through them, or like they were fading away. Their voices grew dim and distant, and then their utterances sounded punctuated and more rhythmic than before. Stockton, everything around me, and myself with it, seemed to be shifting in some way. I don't know any other word for it. Shifting. Let me interrupt and ask you right here. Did you feel frightened? I mean, did all of this include for you an element of fear? Good question, I replied. I'd be asking the same thing if you were telling this to me. The answer is that I did a little at first. Feel afraid, but it quickly went away, and something swept over me such that I lost control of what I felt and of what I thought. All I could do was go along with it, whatever it was that was happening. My own feeling and thinking just faded into, I don't know. It's just that now there was only the event, and I felt no distinction between the inside and the outside. And when you just asked me about an element of fear, Stockton, well, I'll tell you, I think I'd found my elements of the unknown and chance and danger for sure. But that's just in hindsight right now. No lie about that. It's the truth. You found them. Oh, yeah, you found them. We both laughed, a bit nervously, though. So then I couldn't even see the three men anymore. And their talking, remember I said it got distant and punctuated and rhythmical? Well, it got even further away, and it transformed into the sound of a single drum beating far off somewhere. I couldn't tell in which direction, though. Not at first. I laid it down on the hard rock surface beneath me. And soon the drumming sound came from all around. And then it got louder. And then I heard water, too. The sound of water, well, really just a liquid sound, like the sound of the idea of water, or of all liquids rolled into one. It came from all around me. It did too. It came from all around me. And then wind blowing. But I felt no wind. I just heard what sounded like wind. And it got pretty loud. And this was all happening at once. In fact, in another moment, I wasn't even sure if these were sounds at all. Maybe they were just ideas, and I could hear the ideas. Maybe this was the language of the lost world, but even more primal than its language of images and visions that I'd experienced on previous days. Laying there, I looked straight up. The stars looked especially bright, but I could make out dark forms moving through the air far overhead. Silhouettes, rapidly soaring silhouettes. Then I felt water beneath me. No more rock, but water. It rose and carried me with it. I floated on it effortlessly. However, in the darkness, I had no clue whither I was bound, nor did I even wander over it. It wasn't a question to ask, you know. It didn't matter in the least. Nothing like that mattered. More important things mattered. Things like liquid and wind and the earth and the force of life itself, which animated them, which vibrated in them, which moved them, and me along with them, or them in me, and I was everywhere in them. And then I saw little fires rise up around me and go away again. Here and there they sparked to life and then died right back out. The water on which I floated felt warm and soothing, and I rushed when it rushed, and I slowed when it slowed. Sometimes it felt thick and viscous and heaving like volcanic lava, and other times it felt like an ocean current. The wind sound roared now, and my spirit cried out with it and was carried away. Flames of fire licked the sky, and then I didn't even feel the water beneath me anymore. I just rode with the wind. That was really just a sound so ancient that it was the sound of the cosmic motor running, playing an unfathomably deep note. The note that gives birth to all other notes, and to all things in their turns. I perceived no beginning or end to myself or to anything else, but that creation and destruction are simultaneous parts of one thing, of being itself, always right now. And yet also that beyond even being itself is the real, eternal, and infinite. That which just is, regardless of the water and the wind and the earth and the fire. That eternal and infinite is upon which the force of life in all things depends for its existence. I saw all around me transformation, Stockton, transformation. I saw the towering cliffs surrounding me, and I could see inside them and through the whole world. I watched as every atom fell away one by one and got replaced by new ones, everything moving in rhythm. Slowly the sensation of the water turned to that of solid earth, but still I sensed a heaving and a flowing. But then it settled and I found myself on solid rock again. The thunderous sound of wind subsided and turned again to drumming. I laid there on my back, wherever there was, and again I saw the dark forms crossing beneath the stars. I couldn't see the monumental cliffs around me anymore, though, just darkness there, but I could feel their presence as plainly as I could the surface upon which I laid. And both began to vibrate with the drumming sound. It sounded and it felt like all of creation was coming apart at its seams. Yet still the stars and the soaring shapes and an occasional lick of fire overhead. And then I sensed a calling to me. In the sound and the vibrations, Stockton, a calling through the elements, from empty space that is the womb of nature herself. Stockton, please listen to me here. A calling to give her back my bones. And who am I to argue with her, mother of all things? What had I to do but to will in the direction of her desire? I voiced my consent to her silently, and even as I voiced it, the shaking of the mighty rock increased and threw me into the air and down again. Over and over it threw me into the air and down again. Fire in the sky lit up the earth, and the sound of falling water entered my ears from afar. The beat of the drum grew even louder, and with each of its beats my body hurled up and smashed down upon the rock beneath me. Like a rising and falling wind, it tossed me about, and I felt my bones crush against the earth. Over and over, hundreds of times, I struck the solid earth. And each time I did, my bones pulverized even more. I felt them turn to dust inside me. And yet, Stockton, I felt no pain. No pain, Stockton. I felt the destruction of my bones, but no pain. I did, however, feel the most exquisite dread. No fear, mind you, not fear. Exquisite dread. The exquisite dread of the ever-present instant interval between creation and destruction and destruction and creation. And then everything grew still, except for the flames licking the heavens and the dark forms soaring above between the heavens and I. I laid there unable to move. My body felt like rubber, like back on the plane, but not from a dream this time. And this time I liked it. And even if I could have moved, I wouldn't have. I watched the dark forms overhead, and I saw that they were the Andean condors, the great watchers over the lost world, circling high up in the night sky. And as I in turn watched them, I felt the rock below me suck the dust of my bones down into its depths and scatter it through the earth. And I felt the earth replace each particle, one at a time, with a new one down to the last one. And I had all new bones. Then the drumming stopped, and the sound of the distant falling water stopped, and the condors disappeared, and the sky went dark except for the stars, and I drifted off to sleep. When I awoke, the sun was out. I laid on a patch of grass by a slowly moving stream, surrounded by bright green foliage. Voices approached. I yawned and stretched and stood up. Once again, I had no clue where I had ended up, but I knew a lot about where I'd been. It's what I have just now told you. And I felt younger than I had in years, Stockton. Younger than I had in years. A couple of tourists came into view. We talked together a bit, nothing major. I said I'd got lost and fallen asleep. They told me the way to Kanaima. I forget how they say that. Kanaima? It's a village nicknamed by some people the getaway to the falls. And within a few weeks, I was back in Caracas. I rented my former accommodation again, and I laid low like before, resting up and observing the local customs. Then I went over to the airport and I flew back home here. thanking the lost world for sharing its story with me and for giving me a renewed chance to live my life with a deeper sense of wonder. And of course, I thanked Mother Nature for my new bones, and I pondered the unknowable, the eternal is upon which all existence depends. Now, Stockton, may I please have another glass of port? It's the preferred drink of philosophers, you know. So I've heard, he said. So we went upstairs to the kitchen and had another glass. Stockton didn't say, he didn't say much, neither did I. There was always next time for talk. Mulder crunched on his food. Then I got up to leave. Mulder followed me to the door. Stockton opened it, and the three of us stepped out. Then he asked me, "You know what, though, my friend? How can I know if this hasn't all been one big tale or a hallucination? I want to believe, but wow." I bent down and lightly patted Mulder's head. We looked into each other's eyes, and then I lowered mine down a little to show him my respect. He raised his nose against my palm, and I saw his tail wag a little. I stood back up. "Well, Stockton is like this," I said. "Contrary to popular belief, the truth isn't out there. It's right in here." I held up my hands, and I grinned. I cracked all of my knuckles, one at a time. And while I did it, Stockton's eyes went from my hands up to my own eyes, and then back down and up and down again, getting wider each time, as though a miracle were happening right then and there. "So," he said, "it ain't no lie. It is the truth. You know, I'm beginning to believe you're some sort of mystical urban shaman who's tapped into some delightfully strange magic. You keep doing those push-ups, man," I told him, "and I'll see you around the mountain." He held his head up a little more, drew in a deep breath, and waved. Then I turned and crossed their porch, my boots making that sound again. I got on my motorcycle, an old Indian, and rode off down the lane. Mulder ran along behind for a short distance and then just watched. I slowed down for a second, reached into my pocket, and tossed back a little toy bone I'd been saving for him. Then I put some wind in my hair. Beyond that, as per the usual, I didn't have any real plan.